My boss whispered, "I'm just a woman who needs love," and the office party suddenly felt too small. Hello, I'm Timothy. I'm 28, a data analyst at a Chicago consulting firm. And I've always been the quiet one who notices things, not the networker. Working the room, not the guy telling stories by the bar, but I watch, I listen, I see patterns. I grew up in suburban Milwaukee, disappointed by my physician father by choosing spreadsheets over stethoscopes. Nothing dramatic ever happened to me, which is probably why what I'm about to share still feels unreal even now. I've never been the type to cross professional boundaries. That December night, Victoria Lopez, my untouchable boss, stood alone by the windows while colleagues sang karaoke. Her champagne glass trembled slightly. Those 7 words changed everything. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. I'd worked under Victoria Lopez for 18 months at Marshall and Reed Consulting, but I'd never seen her quite like this. From my first day, she'd been a force of carefully controlled energy, the kind of presence that made everyone sit up straighter in quarterly reviews, who could silence a boardroom with a single raised eyebrow. The holiday party swirled around U.S. on the 40th floor of some gleaming downtown high-rise. Chicago's skyline spread out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, dusted with December's first real snow. The event planning team had done their job well. Elegant lighting, generous bar, careful balance of festive without crossing into tacky. Not that it mattered much after 9 p.m., with half the staff attempting karaoke in the corner. I was nursing my second bourbon when I spotted her by the windows. Champagne flute dangling from her fingers. Something about her posture caught my attention, a softness I'd never seen before, shoulders relaxed instead of squared for battle. The party lights caught in the glass, creating a double reflection, Victoria and her ghost self overlaid against the dark city below. In meetings, I was just the data analyst who occasionally earned her approving nod with an insight she hadn't considered, but I'd learned to read the subtle shifts in her expression. The way her dark eyes lit up when someone brought her a fresh perspective instead of excuses. Tonight, though, she seemed somewhere else entirely. Despite being the department head everyone respected, she stood apart from the celebration, lost in thought. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the bourbon, or the way the snow fell in lazy spirals past the windows, or simply that I couldn't bear watching her look so alone. I went to the bar and got 2 fresh drinks, another champagne, and a sparkling water for myself. When I approached, she didn't snap back into her usual professional mask. That's what struck me most, how she let me see her unguarded moment instead of armoring up. The silver streaks in her black hair caught the light as she turned slightly, acknowledging my presence without fully facing me. "Thought you might want a fresh one?" I said, offering the champagne. "The view's something else tonight." She accepted the glass with a small smile that held none of her usual precision. "Thank you, Timothy." Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. She took a sip, then added, "Do you know what's strange about office holiday parties?" I made a questioning sound, not wanting to break whatever spell had made her willing to share actual thoughts instead of polite professional distance. "They feel different as you get older," she said, gaze still on the city lights. "When you're starting out, they feel full of possibility. Like any conversation could be the one that launches your career. Like you're part of something building toward ... something." She shook her head slightly. "Now they're just another night of watching younger people believe what you used to believe." The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the Victoria Lopez who commanded boardrooms and managed million-dollar client relationships. This was someone else. Someone who remembered what it felt like to be hungry and uncertain and full of dreams. I found myself studying her profile, the elegant line of her neck, the way she held herself even in this moment of candor. She'd let her guard down, but hadn't lost any of her innate grace. If anything, this glimpse of the person behind the professional facade made her more compelling. "Is that such a bad thing?" I asked carefully. Having perspective, she turned to look at me then. Really look at me, with those dark eyes that usually assessed spreadsheets and strategic plans. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, at finding actual interest instead of polite deflection. The moment stretched between us, warm and uncertain, as the sounds of the party faded into background noise. I suppose, she said finally, it depends on what you do with that perspective. She took another sip of champagne, and I noticed her red reading glasses tucked into the pocket of her structured blazer, the ones she usually tried to keep out of sight during presentations. The snow was falling heavier now, fat flakes swirling against the dark glass. Victoria and I stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both pretending to study the city lights below, while I tried to process this new version of her, softer, more contemplative, willing to share actual thoughts instead of carefully crafted messaging. The development team exceeded projections this quarter, she said finally, steering us back toward familiar ground. I recognized the gentle course correction, back to business, back to what made sense. 28% over target, I agreed. The Peterson account made the difference. Ah, she took another sip of champagne. Your modeling on that was solid. I particularly liked how you structured the risk assessment variables. The praise warmed me more than it should have. I'd built those models over several sleepless weeks, testing and retesting until the numbers sang. But it wasn't just professional pride making my chest tight, it was how she'd noticed. How she remembered the details around us. The party was shifting into its final phase. Younger associates clustered near the coat check, phones out, debating rideshare options with the loud certainty of the slightly drunk. Someone had finally mercy-killed the karaoke. The cleaning staff were starting to circle discreetly, collecting abandoned glasses and plates. Victoria checked her watch. A subtle gesture I'd seen hundreds of times in meetings. I should review the Peterson presentation for Monday, she said. Start fresh before the weekend gets away from me. I could help, I offered, perhaps too quickly. I know those slides backward and forward. She turned those dark eyes on me again, considering. I held my breath, trying not to look too eager, too obvious about wanting to extend our time together. A curl of her hair had escaped its careful styling, falling soft against her cheek. The conference room downstairs should be empty, she said. Finally, quieter than trying to focus up here. My heart kicked against my ribs as we stepped into the elevator together. The car felt smaller than usual, or maybe I was just hyper-aware of her presence beside me. The subtle scent of her perfume. The way she stood with perfect posture even after a long evening in heels. The descent was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as we walked down the darkened hallway. Most of the floor was in energy-saving mode, motion sensors clicking on as we passed. The conference room was exactly as she'd predicted, empty and quiet. With the same stunning views as upstairs, but without the party's festive glow. I expected her to take her usual seat at the head of the long table. Instead, she moved toward the leather couch along the window wall, setting her laptop on the coffee table. Then she did something that caught me completely off guard, kicked off her heels, and tucked her feet under her. Settling into the corner of the couch like she was at home. Come sit, she said, patting the space beside her. The screen's easier to see from here. I tried not to read too much into it as I sat down, keeping a professional distance while still close enough to see her laptop. But I couldn't help noticing how different she looked, relaxed, almost casual, despite her elegant blazer and silk blouse. Her reading glasses came out of her pocket, and she slipped them on without the usual self-conscious gesture I'd noticed in meetings. Start with the risk modeling section, she suggested, pulling up the presentation. The blue light from the screencast, soft shadows across her features. That's where we'll get the most questions. Sure, I said, thankful to focus on something concrete, instead of how aware I was of her presence, how the couch seemed to grow smaller with each passing moment. Though I think the growth projections might raise some eyebrows too. She nodded, scrolling through the deck. A strand of that escaped hair brushed her cheek again, and I had to fight the urge to reach over and tuck it back. The snow fell steadily outside, creating a sense of isolation, Just us, and the quiet, and the gentle tap of her fingers on the keyboard. The laptop screen cast a soft blue glow between us, but I doubt either of us was really absorbing the Peterson slides anymore. We'd drift into discussion of a data point, then veer into unexpected territory, like when she mentioned the sustainability metrics, reminding her of her brief stint studying architecture. "What made you switch to business?" I asked, genuinely curious about this glimpse into her past. "Practicality won out over passion," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Though sometimes I wonder. I still sketch buildings when I'm stuck. On long conference calls, little details, doorways, window arrangements, how light might fall. Do you still have any of your old project drawings?" "Somewhere in my basement, probably. Along with my daughter's elementary art projects and about 16 years of tax returns." She smiled, but it held a touch of melancholy. "Speaking of my daughter, she's deep in college application anxiety right now. Every conversation becomes a debate about essay topics and safety schools. My sister's the same way with wedding planning," I offered. "Called me at midnight last week about font choices for invitations. Apparently, the wrong serif could doom the entire marriage." Victoria laughed, then a real laugh, warm and unguarded. Nothing like her careful meeting chuckle. I found myself grinning in response, pleased to have drawn out this new sound. The building's heating system chose that moment to cycle off, leaving us in sudden quiet. The silence felt different now, charged somehow. Through the windows, I could hear the muffled sound of traffic far below, taxi horns, and the distant rumble of the L train. "My ex-husband's getting married again," Victoria said abruptly, still looking at the screen rather than at me. "He announced it last week. His fiancée is ... She paused, that edged laugh returning. "Well, she's about your age, actually." I opened my mouth to say something reassuring, but everything that came to mind felt hollow or trite. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opening the private project I'd been working on after hours, a new approach to predictive modeling I hadn't shown anyone yet. "Can I show you something?" I asked. "It's still rough, but I think it could change how we approach client risk assessment." Her expression shifted as I explained the methodology, professional interest replacing that vulnerable moment. She leaned closer to see the small screen, and the subtle scent of her perfume, something warm and expensive I couldn't name, derailed my entire train of thought mid-sentence. "About regression variables, sorry," I said, trying to recover. The key innovation is in how it weights historical data against current market conditions." She didn't lean back, just smiled slightly, the kind of smile that suggested she'd noticed my stumble and chosen not to comment. "Do you know why I pushed for your promotion last quarter?" The question caught me off guard. I assumed it was because of the Morrison project results. "Partly," she said, "but mainly because you think differently. You see patterns others miss, connections that aren't obvious. Like this model, it's elegant, unconventional, but elegant." The praise felt different than it had upstairs, more personal somehow. Sitting here in the quiet with her glasses on and her heels kicked off, I was acutely aware of how close we were, how the couch seemed to have shrunk in the last half hour. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot, coming from you." She held my gaze for a moment longer than strictly necessary, then glanced back at my phone screen. "Walk me through that variable weighting again. I want to understand exactly how you're approaching this." I started explaining the performance metrics from last quarter's reports. But Victoria shook her head, her silver-threaded dark hair catching the dim light. "That's not what I mean," she said softly. "Yes, the numbers were impressive, and your solutions are consistently innovative. But that's not why." She paused, considering her words. "You listen, really listen. In meetings, with clients, with colleagues, you hear what people are actually saying, not just what they're presenting. It's becoming a lost art, that kind of attention." Her words hung in the quiet conference room. Outside, snow continued falling past the windows, muffling the city below. The admission felt weighty, personal, in a way our usual interactions never were. I found myself studying her face, noting how different she looked away from the harsh fluorescent lights of daily meetings, softer somehow, more present. "Tell me more about this model," she said, gesturing to my phone. "The way you're approaching the historical data, it's fascinating. What made you think to weight recent market volatility differently?" We fell into an hour of deep discussion, our conversation weaving between technical specifics and broader insights. She asked sharp questions that made me reconsider aspects I'd taken for granted, while offering perspectives from her years of client experience that highlighted blind spots in my assumptions. I found myself captivated by details I'd never noticed before: how she used her hands when explaining complex concepts, the way her eyes lit up when connecting different ideas, the slight tilt of her head when considering a new angle. Her reading glasses slipped down her nose as she leaned forward to point out something on the screen, and she absently pushed them back up, a surprisingly endearing gesture from someone I was used to seeing as purely professional. When she spoke about past projects, I could hear the architecture student she'd once been, seeing possibility in empty spaces. Her analytical mind drew connections between design principles and data structures that made perfect sense but had never occurred to me. This was Victoria stripped of her careful corporate armor, passionate, engaged, and surprisingly willing to share her own uncertainties about past decisions. The building had grown utterly quiet around us. Even the distant street noise had faded to almost nothing. In this bubble of lamplight and laptop glow, time seemed to move differently. When Victoria finally checked her phone, her eyebrows rose in surprise. "It's almost 2 in the morning," she said, sounding almost puzzled. "I didn't realize, well, at least my daughter's at her father's this weekend. No one waiting up." The mention of time seemed to break whatever spell had held us there. We began gathering our things, though neither of us moved with any real urgency. I closed my laptop slowly, watching as she slipped her heels back on, transforming incrementally back into the Victoria Lopez everyone else knew. We walked to the elevator together, our footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The snow was still falling outside, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Chicago into something from a snow globe. Victoria paused before pressing the call button, her hand hovering over it. She turned slightly toward me, and I could see she wanted to say something more. The moment stretched, full of possibility. But then she just smiled, warm but careful. "Thank you for keeping me company tonight," she said quietly. It was unexpected, in a good way. After that night in the conference room, something shifted between us. Year-end reports and first-quarter strategic planning created legitimate reasons to work late, and gradually, these evening sessions in Victoria's corner office became our unspoken routine. We'd order takeout hugely Thai from the place 2 blocks over that knew her order by heart and spread documentation across her glass conference table. But as January deepened, our conversations would inevitably drift beyond spreadsheets and market projections. The work would get done, always, but there was a new layer of honesty between us that made everything feel different. I found myself noticing small things. How she'd kick off her heels under her desk after everyone else had left, or the way she'd push her reading glasses up into her hair when thinking deeply about something. One particularly snowy evening, the city outside her windows looked like it had been dipped in powdered sugar. The streetlights cast a warm glow through the falling snow, making everything seem softer, more intimate. We'd finished reviewing the Peterson account numbers an hour ago, but neither of us had made a move to leave. "I used to have an art studio," Victoria said suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence. She was looking out at the snow, her profile outlined against the window. Nothing fancy, just a converted garage space. But it was mine. She smiled, but there was something wistful in it. Now, it's just storage. Paintings gathering dust under dropcloths. I turned toward her on the office couch where we'd migrated after dinner. "What made you stop? Life? Marriage, career, all the practical things that demand attention?" She shrugged, but I could hear the weight of old decisions in her voice. It's funny how quickly temporary becomes permanent. I get that, I said, thinking of my own path not taken. My father still introduces me as my son, who could have been a doctor. I tried to keep my tone light, but Victoria's dark eyes found mine, seeing more than I meant to reveal. Family expectations are heavy things to carry, she said quietly. 3 generations of physicians, I explained. I was supposed to be the fourth, but numbers made more sense to me than medicine ever did. Data tells stories too, just different ones. Victoria reached for her phone, unlocking it with quick fingers. Speaking of stories, she scrolled through her gallery for a moment before finding what she wanted. These are some of the last pieces I did. She held out her phone, and I leaned closer to see. The image showed an explosion of color-deep crimsons and electric blues colliding in beautiful chaos. It was nothing like I would have expected from the composed woman I knew from board meetings. This was raw energy captured on canvas. These are incredible, I said honestly, and she smiled, scrolling to show me more. Her arm pressed warm against mine as we looked at the small screen together. Each piece was a revelation, bold, fearless strokes that spoke of someone unafraid to take up space, to make noise. This one was inspired by a thunderstorm, she explained, pointing to a canvas dominated by dark purples and shocking white streaks. I painted it all in one night, just couldn't stop until it was finished. Her voice had changed, becoming animated in a way I rarely heard. And this one, she continued through the photos, each with its own story, its own piece of her past self. I found myself studying her profile as she talked, seeing glimpses of that fearless artist in her expressions. This was a Victoria Lopez I'd never met, someone who stayed up all night chasing inspiration, who wasn't afraid to make a mess, to experiment, to fail spectacularly in the pursuit of something beautiful. Suddenly, she stopped scrolling, as if becoming aware of how much she'd revealed. She started to pull back, that familiar professional mask beginning to slide into place. But then she paused, her phone still displaying a canvas of sunset oranges and deep sea blues. Would you ... double quotes, she hesitated, then continued more firmly. Would you like to see them? The actual paintings, I mean. Sometime, she scrolled to another painting, and my breath caught. This one was different, a tempest of slate blues and stormy grays, but what made it extraordinary were the ribbons of gold, leaf breaking through the darkness like sunlight through storm clouds. This one, ... Victoria's voice softened. I painted this during the divorce proceedings. When everything felt like it was ending, her finger traced the golden streaks on the screen. I kept thinking about how endings and beginnings blur together. Sometimes, how light finds its way through, eventually. I leaned closer to see the detail she was pointing out, where the gold seemed to dance between layers of paint. Our hands were nearly touching on the phone screen, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Then she swiped to the next image, and our fingers brushed. It was the briefest contact. Barely a whisper of touch, but electricity shot through me. We both froze. The quiet of the empty office floor pressed in around us, making me acutely aware of everything: the soft sound of her breathing, the lingering scent of her perfume, the impossible complexity of this moment we'd found ourselves in. Victoria slowly set her phone down on the couch between us. The movement was deliberate, like she was giving us both time to think. When she looked up at me, the professional mask was completely gone. In its place was something raw and honest that made my heart race. "Do you understand what we're doing here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question carried the weight of all our late nights, all our lingering conversations, all the moments we'd carefully danced around this growing attraction. I kept my voice steady despite my pounding heart. Yes. She studied my face intently, searching for something. The city lights through the window cast soft shadows across her features, catching the silver threads in her dark hair. When she spoke again, her words stopped me cold. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not someone's midlife crisis fantasy. I'm not a stepping stone in your career path." Her voice wavered slightly but grew stronger. I'm a woman who needs love. Real love. Not whatever story someone else might be writing about me in their head. The vulnerability in her words made my chest tight. Here was Victoria Lopez, brilliant, commanding, respected Victoria Lopez, laying her fears bare in the quiet of her. Officers saw the courage it took, how much she was risking by naming this thing between us. I needed her to understand that I saw her. Not as my boss, not as an older woman, not as any of the labels the world might try to put on this connection. I saw Victoria, the artist, who painted storms with golden light. The woman who kicked off her heels when no one was watching. The person who listened to my ideas like they mattered. I see you, I said softly. Not a fantasy or a stepping stone. Just you, Victoria. She held my gaze, and I could see her weighing my words, testing them against her experiences, her doubts, her hopes. The snow continued falling outside her window, wrapping the city in silence, as if the world was holding its breath with us. Tell me what you see, she whispered, and it wasn't a challenge or a test, it was an invitation to prove I meant what I'd said, to show her that I truly saw her as she was. I looked at Victoria in the soft darkness of her office, heart thundering in my chest. I see the woman who paints storms with golden light breaking through, who kicks off her heels when she thinks no one's watching, who listens to my ideas like they actually matter. My voice grew softer. I see someone who takes chances even when she's scared, who rebuilt herself after everything changed. I see you, Victoria, just you. Something shifted in her expression, a wall coming down, a decision being made. She studied my face for what felt like forever, her dark eyes searching mine. Then, moving with deliberate slowness, she leaned toward me. The moment stretched like honey, giving me every chance to pull away. To pretend this wasn't happening, I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Her lips brushed mine, soft as a whisper. Just that fleeting touch sent electricity coursing through me. She pulled back slightly, checking my reaction. And I could feel her uncertainty, the weight of professional boundaries, of age differences, of all the reasons this shouldn't happen, hovering between us. I met her gaze, trying to pour everything I couldn't say into that look. Victoria's breath caught, and then she was kissing me again. This time there was nothing hesitant about it. My hand found her cheek, feeling the softness of her skin as the kiss deepened. She tasted like coffee and possibility, and I lost myself in the sensation of her lips moving against mine. In the small sound she made in the back of her throat, years of maintained distance, of careful professionalism, dissolved in that kiss. The world narrowed to just this, her fingers curling into my shirt. The way she pressed closer, how perfectly we fit together. Then the elevator dinged down the hall. We sprang apart like teenagers caught making out. Victoria's hand flew to her lips, eyes wide. Reality crashed back in. We were still in her office, still surrounded by security cameras. Still boss and employee who had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Probably the night maintenance worker doing their rounds. My heart was still racing, but now with a different kind of tension. Victoria stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. I could see her trying to rebuild her professional composure, but the kiss had shattered something between us that couldn't be put back together. She cleared her throat, tried again. We should both go home, think about this, be sure about what we want. Her voice steadied as she spoke, but I could hear the undertone of vulnerability. This isn't something we can take back. I nodded, though the thought of leaving now felt impossible. The taste of her lingered on my lips, and all I wanted was to cross the space between us, to kiss her again, until neither of us could think straight. But she was right, we needed to be sure. This wasn't just about tonight, or the attraction crackling between us. This was about careers and reputations, and hearts that could be broken. You should go first, Victoria said, moving behind her desk, like it could shield her from what had just happened. I'll leave in a few minutes. If anyone's watching the cameras, it won't look like ... double quotes. She trailed off, but I understood. Plausible deniability. Just two people working late, leaving at different times. Nothing to see here. I stood, my legs unsteady. Everything felt different, now the air heavier, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Victoria wasn't looking at me, her attention fixed on straightening papers that didn't need straightening. "Good night, Victoria," I said softly. She glanced up then, and the look in her eyes made my breath catch. Desire warred with uncertainty, hope with fear. "Good night," she whispered back. I made myself walk to the door, each step an exercise in willpower. The hallway was empty when I stepped out, the elevator waiting like nothing extraordinary had happened, like my whole world hadn't just shifted on its axis with a single kiss. 2 weeks. 14 endless days of pretending the kiss never happened. Each morning, I walked into the office carrying the weight of our unspoken moment, like a stone in my chest. The familiar rhythm of meetings and deadlines continued. But everything felt different, now charged with an electricity only Victoria and I could feel. I caught myself tracking her movements without meaning to, hyper-aware of her presence whenever she entered a room. The way she held herself slightly more rigid when I was nearby. How she'd pause fractionally before speaking if I contributed to a discussion. Small tells that probably no one else noticed, but to me, they screamed of the tension. Stretched taut between us, she stopped coming to my desk for quick consultations about reports, sending carefully worded emails instead. Gone were our casual chats about methodology or client dynamics. Each message was polite, professional, and absolutely correct, and completely unlike the easy rapport we'd built over months of working together. I responded in kind, delivering requested analyzes through proper channels, maintaining irreproachable distance. Our exchanges became a masterclass in corporate courtesy, every interaction wrapped in layers of formality that felt like armor against what we both knew lurked beneath the surface. During the weekly strategy meeting, I found myself studying how deliberately she didn't look at me, the careful way she directed questions to the group rather than individuals. I wondered if anyone else noticed the slight tremor in her hand when she reached for her water glass, or how she kept her eyes fixed on her laptop whenever I presented data, the standard end of quarter. Chaos helped mask whatever might have shown in our behavior. Everyone was too focused on hitting targets and finalizing reports to pay attention to the subtle dance of avoidance between the department head and one of her analysts. Or maybe we were just that good at pretending everything was normal. I couldn't tell anymore. Then came that Friday night. I was at home, decompressing from another week of exquisite tension, when the calendar notification popped up. Victoria had scheduled a video call to review the Morrison presentation. The kind of task we used to handle in casual office drop-bys before everything changed. I joined the call exactly on time. Professional to the last detail. When her video connected, I wasn't prepared for the glimpse into her personal space. Warm lighting from a desk lamp, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with well-worn volumes, a small abstract painting visible in one corner that could have been her work. She wore a soft grey sweater instead of her usual structured blazers, and something about seeing her in her home environment made my chest tight. "Thanks for making time tonight," she said, her voice carrying that slight echo of video calls. I wanted to go through the Morrison slides before Monday's meeting. We fell into review mode, discussing transition timing and key message placement. I watched her reference points I'd made in earlier emails, but her eyes never quite focused. On the shared screen, she'd paused slightly too long between slides, like she was gathering herself for each new topic. 20 minutes in, we reached the executive summary. Victoria began walking through the main points, her voice steady and professional. The third quarter results show significant improvement in market penetration, particularly in the Midwest region, where our new strategy. She stopped mid-sentence. The professional mask slipped, just for a moment, and I saw uncertainty flash across her face. Then she looked directly into her camera, and I felt the full force of her attention through the screen. "Do you want to come over?" she asked quietly. The words hung in the digital space between us. All the careful distance we'd maintained, the professional boundaries we'd rebuilt, dissolved in that simple question. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I looked at her through my screen, this brilliant, complex woman who had just cracked open the door between our separate worlds. The silence stretched for one breath. Then two. Victoria didn't look away, didn't try to soften or qualify the invitation. She waited, letting the weight of her question fill the space between us, leaving the next move entirely in my hands. I stared at Victoria's image on my screen, her question echoing in my mind. The carefully maintained professional distance of the past 2 weeks crumbled in those 5 simple words. Without breaking eye contact, I slowly closed my laptop, leaving the call connected my answer clear in the action itself. My hands trembled slightly as I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt surreal, like I was watching myself make this decision from somewhere far away. But I knew with absolute certainty that I needed to be there. Needed to see her away from screens and offices and all our careful pretense. The streets of Chicago stretched empty before me, winter quiet under sodium lights. I'd memorized her address months ago from the employee directory, telling myself it was just professional thoroughness. Now I navigated through familiar neighborhoods that felt strange in the late-hour stillness, each traffic light an eternity of anticipation and doubt. You know those moments when time seems to fold in on itself, when 15 minutes feels like hours but somehow passes in seconds. That was my drive to Lincoln Park, every block both endless and too brief. My thoughts raced ahead to her door, while my hands gripped the wheel with measured control, forcing myself to drive exactly the speed limit. Her townhouse stood elegant among its neighbors, warm light spilling from windows that seemed to watch my approach. I parked across the street, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the quiet of my car. The weight of what we were about to do settled around me like a physical presence. This wasn't just about attraction or forbidden romance, this was Victoria's career, my career. Professional reputations we'd both worked years to build. I pulled out my phone and typed a simple message. I'm here. The response came almost immediately. 3 dots appearing, disappearing, then reappearing before a single word arrived. Good. Moments later, her front door opened. Victoria stood in the warm light of her entryway wearing dark jeans and a dove grey cashmere sweater so different from her office attire that I felt my breath catch. Without her usual armor of structured blazers and heels, she looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. The silver in her hair caught the light as she stepped back, making space for me to enter. I climbed the few steps to her door, each one feeling monumental. We both knew what this threshold represented, not just the physical boundary between outside and in, but the line between everything we had been and whatever we might become. Neither of us moved for a long moment. The winter air crisped between us. Are you sure about this? Victoria asked softly, her dark eyes searching my face. This isn't just tonight. This will complicate everything: work, your career trajectory, my position. People will eventually notice, make assumptions. There's no going back once you step inside. I looked at her then, really looked past the professional polish she wore like shield, past the age difference that seemed both massive and meaningless, past all the reasons this was complicated and risky and possibly unwise. I saw the woman who laughed about wedding chaos and painted storms with golden breaks in the clouds, who listened to my ideas when no one else did. Do you still have any of that Portuguese wine you mentioned? I asked. The one from your trip last year. The unexpected question startled a laugh from her, warm and genuine, breaking through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Her shoulders relaxed as she recognized what I was really saying, that I remembered our conversations, the small details she'd shared in quiet moments, that this wasn't impulsive or shallow, but built on months of genuine connection. Come on, she said, stepping back to welcome me inside. I think I have a bottle I've been saving. I followed her through the entryway into a kitchen that perfectly balanced elegance and comfort. Victoria moved with easy familiarity through the space. Reaching into a wine rack tucked beside sleek stainless steel appliances, she pulled out a bottle and turned it in her hands, studying the label with a slight smile. I've been holding on to this, she said, waiting for something worth either celebrating or mourning. She looked up at me, vulnerability and warmth mixing in her expression. I'm not entirely sure yet which this is. I followed Victoria through her home, both of us carrying delicate wine glasses, taking in details I'd dreamed about but never truly imagined I'd see. The living room opened before us, warm and lived in, so different from the stark professional spaces where we usually met. Her paintings, the ones I'd only seen as tiny images on her phone, hung on the walls, their bold colors and emotional intensity even more striking in person. That stormy canvas with golden breaks hung above the fireplace, commanding attention like a window into her soul. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, the kind of thoughtful playlist that spoke of evenings spent in quiet contemplation. Books lay scattered on side tables, some with elegant bookmarks peeking out, others turned face down mid-read. A cashmere throw draped carelessly over an armchair, a half-empty tea mug on the coffee table, signs of real life, not the perfect order she maintained at work. We settled onto her couch, close enough that our knees nearly touched. The distance between us felt different, here charged but comfortable, like we'd finally found the right space to be ourselves. Victoria took a sip of wine, then set her glass down carefully. I've thought about this moment, she admitted, her voice soft but steady, probably more than I should have. I've worried about the ethics, about crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. She glanced at me, then away. The age difference alone, what people would say if they knew. I've had the same thoughts, I said, watching how the lamplight caught the silver in her hair. The complications, the risks, how it could affect both our careers. I set my own glass down, gathering courage. But none of those concerns seem to matter when we're together like this. They fade, compared to how real this feels. Victoria turned toward me then, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. She moved closer, her hand hovering near mine on the couch cushion between. "US, are you certain?" she asked one more time, her voice barely above a whisper. Truly certain. Instead of answering with words, I reached for her hand, lacing our fingers together. The simple contact felt electric, more intimate than our stolen kiss in her office. This time, when she leaned in, there was no hesitation, no elevator to interrupt us. Her lips met mine with certainty, and I could taste the wine, could feel the slight tremor in her hands as they found my face. The progression felt natural, inevitably each kiss deeper than the last, each touch bolder. When Victoria stood still, holding my hand, I understood without words. She led me down a hallway lined with more art, pausing occasionally to kiss me again, to search my face as if making sure this was still real. Still wanted. At her bedroom door, she stopped. Moonlight spilled through gauzy curtains, painting everything in soft silver. Victoria turned to face me fully, her dark eyes serious despite the flush in her cheeks. This was the final threshold, the last chance to keep our relationship in safer territory. I stepped forward, eliminating what little space remained between us. "I've never been more certain of anything," I whispered against her hair. Meaning every word. She reached behind her for the doorknob, and we moved together into the moonlit room. The door closed behind us with a soft click, sealing us into our own private world, where titles and age differences and professional boundaries ceased to matter. In that moment, we were just Victoria and me, choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. I woke to unfamiliar shadows, my mind taking a moment to process where I was. The disorientation lasted only seconds before awareness flooded back. Victoria's bedroom. The night we'd shared, everything changing in the most beautiful way possible. Pre-dawn light filtered through gauzy curtains, painting the room in gentle blues that made everything feel dreamlike. The bed beside me was empty but still warm. I found Victoria standing by the window, wrapped in a silk robe that caught the approaching daylight. She was watching the sky lighten over Chicago's skyline, her profile serene in a way I'd never seen at the office. The sight of her there, so completely herself, made my chest tight with emotion. The rich scent of coffee drew my attention to two mugs on the windowsill. She turned as I approached, offering one to me with a small, knowing smile. I took a sip, and had to smile back. It was exactly how I liked it, with just enough cream to soften the bitter edge. Of course, she'd noticed how I took my coffee over all those late nights reviewing reports. Victoria had always seen details others missed. We stood in comfortable silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the city wake up. Neither of us spoke at first. What could words add to this moment that actions hadn't already said? The weight of what we'd done, the professional line we'd crossed, hung between us, not as regret but as shared understanding. This wasn't something we could take back, nor did I want to. My gaze drifted to her nightstand, where a gold band lay face down. Its presence more meaningful for how deliberately it had been placed. It wasn't hidden away in a drawer or thrown aside, but acknowledged and set down with purpose. This wasn't about erasing her past, it was about actively choosing her present. I understood the distinction, and loved her more for it. Sophia won't be back until Sunday evening, Victoria said softly, breaking our comfortable silence. Her voice held a question, an invitation. She's with her father all weekend. I set my coffee down carefully, then moved to stand behind her. My arms slid around her waist, and she leaned back against my chest without hesitation. Together, we watched the sun begin its slow ascent, painting streaks of pink and gold across the awakening sky. The city sprawled before us, but in that moment, our world felt wonderfully small, contained to just this room, just us. I'm done apologizing for wanting this, Victoria said, her voice steady and sure. Her hands covered mine where they rested against her silk-covered stomach. I'm done feeling guilty for choosing something that makes me feel alive again. That makes me feel like myself again. I pressed a soft kiss to her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, mixed with something warmer, more intimate. I wouldn't want your apologies anyway, I told her honestly. I want you exactly as you are, brilliant and complicated and completely real. No apologies needed. She turned in my arms then, facing me with that direct gaze I'd first fallen for in business meetings, now softened by shared vulnerability and morning light. The sun continued its rise behind her, haloing her dark hair with threads of gold, and I wondered how I'd ever thought I could resist falling in love with her. Good, she whispered, reaching up to trace my jawline with gentle fingers. Because this is who I am, now, someone who chooses what she wants instead of what others expect. Her touch drifted to my lips. The light. And I choose this. I choose you. The weekend unfolded in glimpses of Victoria's real life, each moment precious because it felt stolen from our normal roles. Saturday morning, she took me to her favorite farmer's market, her hand casually finding mine between vendor stalls. We bought fresh pasta and tomatoes, laughing over cooking techniques in her sun-drenched kitchen that afternoon. Later, she led me to her garage, pulling dust covers off canvases stored against the walls. Each painting revealed another layer of herbled strokes of color. Moments of creative fearlessness preserved in oil and acrylic. She spoke about a studio space she'd been considering in Wicker Park, asking what I thought about the neighborhood, the lighting, genuinely wanting my perspective. Sunday brought harder conversations over coffee at her kitchen island. Monday loomed, forcing us to consider the practical implications of what we'd started. Victoria suggested keeping things private initially, protecting both our professional reputations while we figured out the deeper complications. I understand, I said, stirring my coffee, but I won't pretend this meant nothing. I can't. She reached across the counter, her fingers gentle against my cheek. I couldn't pretend if I tried, she said softly. That's not what this is about. I left before her daughter's return. The goodbye waited with everything still unsaid. Hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from Victoria, photo of that storm grey painting she'd shown me in her office, the one with golden light breaking through. Her text read, "Starting this one again. Different perspective now." Monday morning arrived with its familiar rhythms. I found Victoria's meeting request in my inbox. Morrison presentation review, 10 a.m., so perfectly professional. But when she handed me coffee during the meeting, her eyes told a different story. We were writing our own narrative now, one careful day at a time. building something neither of us expected, but both chose to pursue. If tonight's ending felt right, hit subscribe and share this with one person who needs a gentle story. I'll be here tomorrow with another